Welcome to the A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach, and up next we discuss the importance of both self-discipline and agility. And after that, World of Running updates about Footlocker Championships, ultra records, and more cross-country. Great to be with you once again and remind you that we want to answer your questions about anything to do with running, and we'll do that at the end of the month. So submit your questions now so you can have them in time for this month's episode, or if we run out of time, we'll answer them on the next one. So go to AtoZrunning.com/question to share your questions now.
We have been able to connect with some of you at races in person. Well, events, I should say. The Whoville 5K was super fun, and I was able to meet Sammy, who is a listener and fellow runner in the Grand Rapids area. So that was really cool, finally meeting in real life, and so many others of you. It was a really, really fun event.
Yes, and if you missed it, then you missed the festivity and the seasonalness of it, and so you won't have nearly as much fun this season, festively, holiday speaking. But if you were there, you noticed just how awesome it was. So it's one of those events. Whoville is lots of fun because it's like, you know, wear the costumes and go a little eccentric with it. And everyone did exactly that. They start the whole event with like announcing the committee of crazy people, like the Grinch and Thing 1, 2, 3,
the mayor of
4,
Whoville.
and 14. The mayor. Santa was there.
Santa
made a guest appearance just for that event, which, you know, he's prone to do.
That was fun.
So it was good. It was cool. And as a consequence, we are so glad that we did it, and glad to connect with many of you, lots and lots of you who did it. And so come around next year, do it again. One thing I wanted to mention, we were in conversation with a few, and the question came up because this is kind of a fun run type of event. It's not timed. And many of us like to have these things timed in general.
Even if
just
they're fun.
like as a rule of thumb, the assumption is, well, we should time it. And someone expressed, well, others feel that they don't want it timed because of the nature of the event, because it's supposed to be not serious and kind of like a fun thing. And timing it would create a kind of like pressure to be more serious. And I thought to myself, now that's an interesting scenario. And it made me think about mindset things, which we've been talking a lot about lately. So I wanted to just simply reflect on that and understanding that there's pros and cons to both scenarios. We get that. But one of the things that came up was if you time it, that creates the opportunity for people to be able to have like a timed event if they want to and kind of go out and push themselves and see what they can do. And if you don't time it, that opportunity is not present at all. So that's the pro for those who want it timed. The con is if you time it, that people will feel greater pressure. Like if I don't run it hard and now that time is like kind of part of my permanent record there, or I'll want to run harder if it's timed, and if it's not timed, I won't have that pressure. And that strikes me that in many of these types of instances, the question there is simply one of mindset. And if I am able in that situation to adjust my expectations and my perceptions, then it matters little whether there's a clock timing it. Granted, that still might not convince anyone. You know, you still might not like the feeling of it. And I get that. But it is a kind of a question of, with these types of events, you know, what's better, what's worse. And I think it's kind of nice to have options for both, you know, at times. I can get that.
This was still a fun event.
But it was a fun event
time.
without it timed.
Yeah.
And with it timed would probably be just as much fun in my imagination.
Yeah.
Because it was loads of that. So anyway, that was cool.
And I think, too, it's good to do like a lot of events if you're able to and enjoy it, if that's something that you like to do. And intentionally run some of them where you know it's not going to represent your best. So you can kind of get in the hang of maybe not taking it too seriously, but also having times where you're like, this is serious and I am going to go for a time. But it's okay to post times that don't represent my fitness or represent what I'm capable of.
Well, it's one of those where
you don't have to do that. I'm just saying, like, if that's something that you've been thinking about, I think that could be an encouragement.
Yes, but think also about like the hot race scenario. So when I feel this way about like if it's not the representation of my best effort, then I don't want, you know, that I feel badly to have that time there. You know, anytime it's a hot or humid race, you cannot perform at your best effort. It simply is not possible.
You can perform at your best effort, but not your best time.
You can't perform as well in a hot and humid race as you could if it just simply were not hot or humid on
your
that same day.
Your times will be slower. Yes.
And so as a result, it's that question of like so many runners. I talk to many runners all the time who are very frustrated with a slow race in bad conditions. And my thought is, why does it matter? The conditions were bad. It's going to slow you down. The question is not, was my time slow? The question is, how much of the effort did I give?
It's still frustrating. We can give people.
I'm not saying it's not
frustrating.
I'm saying the point is we should not give it so much power over us.
Yeah.
Because it's always going to be that way. If it's hot, we can't control it.
We are not how fast we run.
Ah, yes. And so all of this being the case, I think the same kind of thinking tends to come into these types of things. We're giving too much power to the thing that's outside of ourselves. And perhaps there's ways to lessen that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe racing more could help.
That's a good suggestion. Yes, that was a good suggestion. And racing in off times. You don't have to race only when you feel like you're at your fittest.
Because sometimes you'll surprise yourself too. Because like it's not every
Andy,
time.
You're getting back to the problem though, where the time matters more.
Well, I'm just saying, like
the
more that you do it, the more comfortable you are, and the more opportunities you might strike on a good day. So.
And there's other reasons to enjoy the thing as it is. And many
Absolutely.
of you have said that to us about reasons you enjoy racing that are not just because of like performance.
Speaking of which, there's another race that it could be on your schedule.
Could be on your schedule. So you definitely want to run Rivertown races in April. It's the end of April in West Michigan. And so if you're in the Grand Rapids area, it's one of our favorites. And as far as half marathon, 10K, and 5K events go, you've got a few options. So it can kind of meet the flavor you need. Now, that being the case, it's also especially great because we're part of it. Yeah, which makes everything better. So if you are looking for some training support and you sign up for that event, then you have access to a generic training plan that we've made for anyone for each of the events. But also you can get a 50% off discount for a customized training plan if you are already registered, which means you need to register now, because if you wait to register, you can't get the benefit of the customized training plan. If you're anything like me and you like to wait until a week before to register for events, don't do that here. So register now. Go to rivertownraces.com and you can learn all about it. And then there's a training page there on the website, and that's how you're going to access our material as well. And the other side of this that's important to know is, let's say Rivertown Races is not your primary goal for the season, but you're training for something in the spring time and you want to run some other races. If you sign up for Rivertown Races, but you're training for, let's say, a marathon later on or a 25K or something like that, you can still get the discounted training plan because you are signed up for Rivertown Races.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is an exciting opportunity for anyone who's running Rivertown Races in the spring, and if you want to know more, go to rivertownraces.com. With that, let's get on to the main topic. So I have thoroughly enjoyed the writings of one psychologist, Peter Hollins, who writes, his shtick is about like helping college students be better at learning. And so like you can study and have it be more productive, and you can like get better grades because you're remembering things better. And he sells lots of books. No surprise there, right? But I've read a lot of his material because I'm fascinated with the psychology of learning, which is the way he focuses on it, like the neuropsychology. How does your brain work, and how do we then do things to help it work better? And most recently, he was publishing his newsletter to kind of sell his latest course that he came out with. And the course is it's called Build Your Self-Discipline. And specifically trying to address the problem of procrastination and how we can be more productive by simply implementing some new strategies and approaches.
And so that gave us the idea to do an episode about running as it pertains to this topic.
Yes. So that's one of the things, as I've read Holland's work, I'm finding that his appeal is very general. These are the kinds of things that just help us be better at accomplishing things we want to try to accomplish, regardless of what they are. And so as we started thinking about it, we're thinking, okay, self-discipline is important. So we're going to dwell on that for a little bit. But if I am too self-disciplined, especially as we talk with many of you as adults who live lives beyond just our sport, who are multi-dimensional humans, we work, we have families, we have like just personal enjoyments that we want to have time for sometimes. Well, I guess some of you do. I don't know much about that. But so that being the case, how do we then address the balance well also? And that's something that I think is especially important to enjoying the things that we are being disciplined about. So let's talk a little bit about both of these things and try to kind of mesh them together in a way that works for runners. So the first thought was, if self-discipline is kind of this idea of like controlling my life, Peter Hollins specifically isolates the concept of attention within that. And what most of self-discipline and most of productivity is about is what I'm doing with my attention. To what am I attending? And that reminded us as we were discussing recently about the book Flow, when we were specifically looking at some of the mindset things related there, and that concept of attention chaos. You remember that? When we were discussing that. So attention chaos is like this idea that I'm not doing anything to control my attention. It's just being dragged in every direction that something wants to drag it.
Doesn't that sound like a lot of our lives?
I mean, basically, that's what it means to live, as an adult with a family and a job, and right? My attention's just going every direction. Yes. So that's familiar. So if attention chaos is the worst possible state of things, what Peter Hollins is suggesting in a lot of his work is that procrastination is largely the result of that, of kind of living in that attention chaos sense, not controlling my attention directly. And so then if I want to be productive, the first thing that I have to do at the root of it is to increase my self-discipline as well as consistency. And I think if I were to say it in a phrase, I think the idea of like autopilot, just kind of living life on autopilot, just simply doesn't work. We never feel satisfied. We never feel like we're getting the things done that we needed to or wanted to get done. And we always have this question of like, well, how did I spend so much time on my phone? I just looked down and suddenly 2 hours have gone by or an hour has gone by. Or did I really just watch 6 episodes in a row of that thing? Really? Yes, I did.
And on the opposite side of like autopilot, we don't want to be driven by momentary desires either. So we don't want to also go in the direction of impulse. So then what also can harness that is self-discipline.
Yeah. So it at the root of it is this thought of like, how am I then conditioning my attention, controlling my attention, or learning to discipline my attention is kind of the thought there.
Yeah. And I think too, when I brought up the element of desire, and I know this is not what's written about in this material, but when we talk about self-discipline and crafting our desire and not having that chaos of desire as well. So finding out our intentions helps us then craft what will be our path, our schedule, our self-discipline actions.
Yeah, Jaron Lanier writes a lot about social media algorithms. And one of the things that he expresses is that the reason they win, the social media algorithms, is because they make you think you want the thing. But all along, it was behavior modification. They were trying to find a way to create a desire in you that was not there before. And once the desire is there, they don't have to do any more work. Now you want it, and you think you want it because you want it, but really you want it because they made you want it. And so that's what this kind of like this attention chaos thing, when I think about the things that tend to, like, I feel like I want to do a certain thing with my time, and then there's something else that I should do, and I don't really want to do it as much. How did that happen? When the thing that I should do is going to lead to the desirable outcome. Like I'll get something done. I'll be more productive. I'll accomplish some big goal. Let's talk running talk for a moment. I want to achieve this big goal, right? And it's, big goals in running tend to take a long time to achieve because nothing happens quickly for a runner except for when you're fast. Then I guess some things could happen quickly. But anyway, so nothing happens immediately, right? So as a result, we have to be patient and consistent. That's why we keep saying those two words over and over and over on the podcast. But what happens there is we get to this point where it's like, I don't really want to run today. Well, why don't I really want to run today? Well, because it sounds nicer to sleep in, or maybe you need to sleep in. So we're not saying you shouldn't,
right.
We're going
to
talk about the balance here in a minute. But so something else sounds better to me. But is it really something I want more? Like, do I really want to have a little bit more time on my phone or doing some interesting things with media or,
playing video games
or watching shows, all this stuff. Do I really want to spend more time doing that? Or do I want to like achieve this big dream of mine, like qualifying for that Boston thing or running that time or getting to do my first ever thing, all that kind of stuff, right? And of course the answer is, well, no. This is what they do in the life coaching sessions with these kinds of things, by the way. They start talking about what are the big goals that you have? What are the steps to achieve them? What are you doing today to achieve those steps? So productivity is that question of like, I'm working toward that goal. And as Andy suggests, we don't always want to do that. And so part of this is like addressing internally, where is this desire coming from and why is it that the desire is skewed?
And we also want to do it. So we want to design our desires. Design our desires. So instead of being impulsive with our desires and being taken on a whim, I think that it's great that we can think through these things, that as runners we have practice in delayed gratification, but also we can take hold of what the run can bring us for that day. And we've talked a lot about that on this show. So is it that time with your running friend? Is it that time to be alone? Is it that time for meditation? So I personally have a hard time with self-discipline sometimes. But when I'm able to design my desires, if I say, I don't want to run, well, there are so many things about the run that I want, that I long for, like connection to others, connection to God. There's so many things that I can give towards the outlook that will help me choose that again and again. Now, of course, there are going to be days that I'm not going to like be as thrilled to do it, but I tell myself like I will feel better. So maybe I'm just going to like tell myself, I think a lot of us do this, like bargaining with oneself. I'm going to go outside and I'm just going to start walking. Because I feel tired today, I don't feel motivated. I'll just get out there and start walking. Maybe I'll run. And then you end up feeling awesome and you end up doing your scheduled run.
Once you're committed, it's kind of hard to convince yourself not to then.
Well, get out the door. I think that that's helpful to get out the door, knowing that there is actually some benefit in the momentary too, and not to be resentful of your long-term goal or start doubting that long-term goal, because there are gifts to be had in the moment too.
Yeah, and most of mindset work around this area will ultimately lead us toward this goal of, it's not really always about this big outcome somewhere down the road. It's also about like entering into, and this is what the whole entire work around the concept of flow did, is it helped us grasp the concept of, I want to do this thing now for this thing now, and I don't have to think about anything else. I can thoroughly be involved in and enjoy this. And
I truly think that's how we can thrive. It's finding the benefit in the momentary, or the joy in the momentary, whatever running might bring you for the day, as well as then you can look towards future goals too, because there are a lot of things to be had. But if that doesn't come to fruition, if I get injured, like the 50% of runners who are injured right now, is that the stat?
I mean, yeah,
there's like 50%
of 25%
are injured right now. Then I'm not going to think that was a waste. No, because every run there was benefit for me, for my body, and for my thriving in life.
Yeah. So the very beginning of self-discipline is this idea of training my attention. And that's where, so if we go back to kind of the reason we were starting to think about this in general, Peter Hollins' work begins with this idea of, I have to command my attention. And in order to do that, we really have to understand what things are dragging our attention away unknowingly, and take a short inventory of my attention and where it goes in a given period of time. But also think about, what are the things that I need to attend to which I need to attend in order to achieve whatever the state of productivity is that I want. So I have to create for myself a vision of self-discipline, and that involves primarily to what I am attending. And so as I do that, then I can really kind of create a sense of, I know where I need to be giving focus, and I also know that that's not going to be perfect all the time. Enter then agility.
Agility. I like that word for it.
Agility. Well, I was thinking, because you can use the words like adaptability. You can use words like flexibility. I don't think flexibility works in as broad a sense as agility.
Flexibility and adapting are like words that we use in running.
Yes.
and they have different meanings.
And they have different
so
meanings.
it's better to use.
But so does agility, Andy.
I guess agility does
all
too.
these words have multiple
okay,
meanings.
all these words. Yeah, you're right.
So we're talking about cognitive agility
Yeah.
and emotional agility, not physical
Schedule agility.
Yes. So then in that sense, in order to balance this out, I have to have a clear sense of self-discipline, but I also have to be able to respond positively when something interrupts that. And so this agility thing is not meaning like some days I'm not in the mood, and so I'll just have a different solution. That's not exactly, because self-discipline is going to hopefully be the thing that helps me get into that, regardless of whether I felt like I wanted to that day. But is there some external need to adjust? And so it can be things like family and or health and or just other priorities that have to take precedence over my running goals today.
Right. And I think that having the holistic piece in mind is going to help us do that. We've given suggestions on the show of how to modify your training. We actually have a whole episode about modifying your training based on interruptions or things that might happen in your life. So
now there's the disruptions episode.
This
disruptions. Good listen. Go back.
Yes. But I think when we are able to see like, okay, this is what's important. So, okay, my family is going to be to take precedence, or, my health, my overall health is going to be the most important thing when it comes to my training outcome too. So like if I'm going to run no matter what, even at the detriment of my ability to recover, that's also not a wise choice. So moving away from like this run and the amount that it says on my schedule to seeing like, okay, what was it supposed to do for me today? Now let's be agile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. So if agility is what it ought to be, then it's really about how am I responding positively to these things. So part of that is a question of I also need to know what types of things should cause adjustment, and or what types of things should I not necessarily feel like I need to adjust accordingly. And this is where, so that topic in particular we covered at length with the disruptions episode, but also just thinking about there are kinds of disruptions that don't necessarily demand adjustment in the same way as other things. And so we tend to feel like the type of adjustment we have to make is binary. Like I either do it or don't do it. I either have it or don't have it. But a lot of times the type of adjustment also has to do with just the degree of intensity toward a thing. And I mean that literally in running, like effort-wise, but also I mean that like figuratively in terms of like how much focus am I putting on this in a given period of time, and how much attention am I giving to this. So I can have situations where it's like, I'm planning out my running schedule very specifically to a significant degree, and I know exactly when I'm doing strength and mobility routines and how much time I'm spending with those, and I have it like regimented. And that's kind of like the state of I know what every minute is used for and where it's going and when I'm doing it. And so that's good. But at the same time, that's a degree of intensity that isn't always possible.
Right.
And so I could still fit all those things in another scenario, but I don't necessarily wake up every morning knowing exactly when I'm going to do each thing as much as it's trying to fit them in where they go. We just have to be careful, because when I try to live in what I might call an agile state like that, it is so much easier to be disrupted, which is why Peter Hollins specifically recommends, and when he talks about self-discipline, is he recommends high levels of structure as the status quo. The baseline is highly structured, but I'm prepared to be able to adapt if I need to.
I have.
You don't feel that way, do you?
Well, I've always had a hard time with
it.
schedule, because what brings me a lot of joy is running with other people, and it's not at the same time every week. So there have been periods of time, and it is easier, like when there's a certain day I run with a certain person every single week. But I like to have some amount of agility in order to run with other people, or like with my kids too, being able to be flexible with that. So I do agree. I am better when there is a structure, but I would lose the joy if I just went by my own schedule and wasn't adjusting to run with other people.
Yeah, and so what it tends to require is in my situation, what's the amount of structure that helps produce the goal and the level of productivity necessary, but not so much structure that I can't fulfill it. This is one of the problems where we run into a lot of times when you have someone else help you do something like this. You create an amount of structure that simply is unrealistic. It's just never going to happen. And I know it's never going to happen, but someone's telling me like that's good and I need to do that.
So if any of our athletes are listening, which many of you do, and you have the schedule from Zach that has, all the mobility and strength and everything, and you're feeling overwhelmed,
no one ever feels overwhelmed.
This is your hint to reach out and say, this is just not manageable in my life, which we have had a lot of those conversations too. And then we adjust and we're agile and we say, what is the next best thing? What is the next best scenario? And what can we fit in? And what things are going to take priority as we look at the time that we have? Because it is precious. And we realize that not all of it is going to be spent on ourselves and our training. So, our general health and well-being during the holidays, I feel like this is a really important conversation, and it's one that's had a lot, but I think that it is truly something that many of us struggle with, and that's getting in everything and the social obligations, the familial obligations during Christmas time.
Yeah, I mean, this is always for almost every runner on the planet.
Yeah.
Times that are busier, like uncommon things where you have more uncommon things happening, like holidays if you have family visiting or you're visiting or things like that, or times when you have like breaks, so if you've got kids in school, when they're not in school, things are very different, right? So all of that kind of stuff, we have to anticipate there's going to be a need for a different kind of structure at different seasons of life or at different seasons of the year as well. And one of the good examples of that I've talked with many runners who do this just as a very practical thing is I plan to have a kind of unstructured training time from the third week in November until January 1st. And it's just, that's the assumption during that period of time. And so I'm not using that to train for like some big major goal in that kind of a sense.
Yeah. And there's just a couple of rules of thumb that we give our athletes that we thought we'd share with you, but it might look different according to what your training looks like. But we say, maybe not more than 2 days off. So like if you have to take a day off and then something arises on the next day, like that third day, find a way, because your body is not going to be happy to not be supple and mobile and have that blood flow or your systems activated. So making sure that you're having some kind of, even if it's just sometimes, that's better than none, no times.
Right.
Yeah. So we recommend not more than 2 days off in a row. And a lot of times, like this is not specifically for the holidays per se, but finding that self-discipline, we want to have flex, but find the firm. I like how there's alliteration there.
You did that on
Give
purpose.
The flex, but find the firm.
You're just trying to find a way to say that naturally, but it just it's a little unnatural.
A lot of times for me, I'll be like, before I go into bed, I need to do my PT. So whether I did it in the morning, the afternoon, or the evening, like I'm in my pajamas. Okay, well, I'm still doing my PT before I get in bed. Okay. So before I do X, I need to get this other thing done that's going to help me feel better and thrive better. Sometimes that's helpful to have that framework.
So if I may, then to kind of bring us full circle and wrap it up with this single most important suggestion, this then is Peter Hollins, like, this is the thing you do first that begins all the good work here. Ultimately, the goal is to create habits out of self-discipline so that it's not something that I have written on a piece of paper exactly what's going to happen and when, but rather that's the way I live. Now that's the goal. But if that's not the way things are happening currently, then I have to find a way to create that habit. And so here's what Peter Hollins suggests. He says, take your attention and schedule it. So for certain amounts of time, at certain points, I can do these things or I can't do these things. So I cannot look at my phone for the next 3 hours. I cannot do this game, watch this show on these days. I can do it at this time for this amount of time. And so like the whole entire premise is I'm not necessarily, it's not that important exactly how much time it is or exactly when it's happening. Well, it is ultimately, because otherwise, time's finite. So we have to fit it into the finite box. But it's not really that important as much as I'm creating a limitation, a boundary that I'm agreeing to myself. It's an agreement with myself that I will do this thing and then stop doing this thing or not do this thing, depending on the time, right? And all that's doing is it's making it easy for me to start without feeling guilty and for me to stop without being feeling like I have to resist that, like, well, maybe I'll just do a few more minutes. No, I already told myself I was going to only do this for 60 minutes. And when the timer rings, or in Andy's case, when the app pops up and says your time limit has reached its limit, you don't hit the ignore button because you already told yourself that's when I'm done. And so I'll be done. Now, if it were only that easy, we'd probably be more successful at it. So the next step, and this is now deviating from Peter Hollins' formula, but the next step is have someone else in on the party with you. Don't try to just do this by yourself in isolation, because we are really good at deceiving ourselves. We're also really good at breaking promises with ourselves because there's no consequence. Well, there is a consequence. You're less productive and don't do the things you want to do, but there's no consequence.
You're the one who suffers.
Yeah. So bring someone else into the fold, either to do this with you for better success, or, talk to the friend, the coach, the family member, those type of people, and say, this is my plan. Here's what I'm going to do. And here's what I'm going to tell you how it went. Yeah. Don't put it on them ask you about it, because they may, if they're really great friends, families, coaches, well, I shouldn't even say that, because even if they are really great, they might not remember to. It's not their job to ask you about it. It's your job to tell them how it went, and therefore be accountable to it, to the goal. So whatever that may look like, of course, that can look like whatever you want it to. The point is that if I want to be successful with this, Peter Hollins says I start with scheduling my attention and be very specific about it initially, trying to create a habit ultimately, so I don't have to keep that schedule rigid my entire life, but I'm trying to create the habit. And in order to be successful in creating that habit, I probably need other people to help me with it to be most successful. Mm-hmm. And it's even better if they're kind of like doing it with me. So if you're in a home with other family members, get them on board and all do this together. You're going to be way more successful if you do that.
Yeah, if it's like part of the structure.
This is the way we live, right? Okay. Now you know how to be productive, and you can solve all the problems. And I can tell you that an entire industry of literature is based around this concept. And the number of new books every year that come out about how to be productive and increase your self-discipline is astounding. And every one of them is a bestseller. So we know it's needed.
But I will remind all of you that productivity is not the king of the world.
Not saying it is.
So productivity is great because it's going to help you achieve your goals. It's going to help you, do the things in life that you've set out to do. However, during this holiday season, if sitting with your grandma instead of doing...
Schedule that into your attention. For the next 2 hours, I will sit with my grandma and nothing else will be attracting my attention. No phone, nothing else, but 2 hours I will do nothing else but sit with this relative and enjoy the time. Now,
but there's spontaneous blessings that happen, Zach.
But you clearly get the point I'm leading up to. Yeah. Put the phone away and tell myself I'll look at it again in 2 hours. Yeah. Unless there's an emergency and my kids are in pain.
Right. Well, just have the sounds, just have the notification sounds
right. There's always a what if
and stuff. So then you don't have to look at it if the notification will ding at you that you got a text or call.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us today. We're not done yet, though, because we have the world of running.
Well, congratulations is in order for Jared. Congrats on the Dallas Marathon and an impressive execution of the race. So talking with Jared ahead of time for the race, and he says, well, I definitely want to try to run strong, run well, and kind of have like come away from this feeling like that was an effective test of my current state of things, right? And so we kind of oriented ourselves around a race plan, and then he went out there and he just
crushed it,
did exactly that and did it really well. And so if you ever want to see, check out Jared's Strava, and you can see what it looks like to negative split a marathon basically almost every single mile. It's really quite an impressive thing and not easy to accomplish. Even if someone's well accustomed to doing things like that, anything can happen in a marathon. and you never know. And so he pulled it off.
Yeah, way to go, Jared. Congrats.
Well done. All right, good stuff. And of course, thanks to many of you who participated in Whoville, and some of our people were there too.
It's good to see Hannah and Adi.
Yep, good stuff. Well, let's start in on first up being Footlocker, which
it's not called Footlocker, Zach.
I'm going to call it that because that's what it is, Andy.
It will always be.
It is the national championships for high school cross country, if there is one. And there's always a constant debate. So you heard us talking about Nike Cross Nationals last week,
which were well huge. Attended by really impressive high schoolers.
Nike Cross was bigger than it's ever been, but that's because they've been expanding it deliberately. Nike has been. A lot of people have been complaining because Nike is like crossing into other races' turf by doing that, because Nike has always been like the team cross country championship, and Footlocker has always been like the individual, like the stars of the stars kind of thing. And now between the two of them, if you were to combine them, then you basically had all the stars of the stars, but there were many at Nike Cross who didn't run Footlocker, and there were others at Footlocker who weren't in Nike Cross. And so you didn't really get a pure representation of what happens if you put all of the very fastest high schoolers together in one race, which is kind of what they're trying to accomplish with these things.
Right, yeah.
But anyway, it was close enough.
Both of the races were highly impressive. So
yes, and it's not, don't get me wrong, personally, I like more race opportunities. I am always the fan of let's just have more of this kind of stuff. However, I would like to have an opportunity to like see what happens if all the best high schoolers run against each other one time on the same day, because that just never happens. But in this instance, we got a good flavor between the two at the very least. So Footlocker was incredible. It's not called Footlocker this year. It wasn't called Footlocker last year either. It's gone between like whoever sponsors it. They changed the name. East Bay was the most recent one. Running Lane. And then now, so you had the Champs Sports cross-country championships, because Champ Sports is a sponsor this year. But what it is it's basically the most historic high school. So you can go back in the history of Footlocker and see who were the people who, like, the Footlocker champs of all these years, and what did they go on to do? Because chances are the top finishers in Footlocker go on to do great things, it seems.
And you can literally see that because we are linking to the footage where they did that in the broadcast.
They actually showed. Went through, it was really cool.
Like, here's Jenny Simpson and Emily Dathan
Ritzenheim
and Dathan Ritzenheim
and Grant Fisher.
Yeah, so that was actually pretty cool and enlightening. And it also just gave the event even more hype before you got to see these kids come up, and they're like, it's essentially like, remember these names, because
remember how epic this race is.
Because the kids that come out of this are likely athletes that you will follow in the future.
Yeah. For example, Dathan Ritzenheim, 2-time Footlocker champion, goes on to break an American record and 3-time Olympian. Grant Fisher, 2-time Footlocker champion, wasn't he?
I don't know why you're asking.
I think he won 2.
But he,
Footlocker
he has 2
champion,
American
goes
records.
on to break 3 American records, and
Sorry,
is it
Grant.
3 now, or is it 4 now? Anyway, so and all this stuff. So anyway, those are just 2 examples, and the reason why I brought those up at all is because it's also worth noting that Michigan, as a state, remains tied for the boys' championship with the most titles from one state.
Woot woot.
That's Michigan with 8 individual titles. Yep. California
cool.
also has 8. So I guess you can give the shout out there too. But we're not from California, so. All right.
But a lot of you are, so we'll nod to you.
In fact, yes. And the girls' side, California holds the most with, I think it was 10 individual titles. So that's something. Very cool stuff. So historically, we got that. It's really cool, and you should go check out the video footage to get more of that.
We'll link to that.
We're also linking to the results and the coverage for both the girls and the boys races, because we're going to say some names, and we're going to mention a few things here that aren't necessarily going to be terribly familiar. But if you go read the coverage from DieStat, you get a more kind of fuller picture of all the people and the who's who and such. It's always cool. Well, on the girls' side, it was an interesting race.
I think it's usually pretty interesting,
it
right?
probably
in cross country,
is.
when there's a lot of hills, there's going to be dynamic racing.
Yeah. So this is a famous course. They always run Footlocker at the same course in San Diego, Balboa Park, which I've run there. Yeah, Balboa Park is quite hilly. So when they say this is a hilly course, I'm like, oh yeah, I've run on some of those hills. They're not small.
No.
And when you're running 5K hard, it's even worse. So these kids,
smart kids, by the way.
Kids,
a lot of them
running really savvy races. So what you had in the girls' race is you had some early lead changes, kind of a little bit of back and forth, and then a pack breaks away. And what was interesting is once the pack started breaking away, like one after another, four or five of these girls would like surge and kind of string it out a little bit, and then they'd catch back up, and then someone else would surge like right away. There was no rest. So the one thing I took away as I was watching the girls race is like the winner of that race was just like the toughest of the tough, because there was no chance to take a break.
She was doing some leading too. The gal who won, we're going to get to her name in just a minute. But I think the smartest race plan would be to let all the other girls surge and surge and surge and wear themselves out, and then make your move at the end. But they all did their fair share of surging.
Yes, and Carrie Beloga's surging was the most violent because she did it on the uphills, and that's not nice. That hurts.
It was smart of her because it proved to be successful. Carrie was the winner of the girls' race.
Yes, and it'll be notable here in a moment as to why, but she's going to be heading to Colorado for college, so the Buffaloes are acquiring yet another Footlocker champion, among several others that they've acquired over the years. And as it goes, she ran the 8th fastest time ever on that course as well in 16:49. For a challenging course, high school girls cross-country race, that is an incredibly fast time.
Right. When you have people like Sarah Hall, Jenny Simpson, or these women who've gone before her that are legends in the sport.
Jordan Hesse.
Yeah.
And so she's running faster.
She's like 8th all time. She's in good company.
Legendary company. That's got to be really exciting for her.
Yeah, and this is not her first time at the event. She was 4th last year.
3rd time, in fact, at Footlocker National Championships. She was 11th as a sophomore, 4th as a junior, and then won it as a senior. So Beloga really just kind of like showing, experience matters here.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
And when they were doing the announcing, they were saying that she studied the course and she's run it, but like she was thinking it through. Like she had a strategy going into it.
Definitely that. So that was cool. That was exciting. On the boys' side, it was also a very interesting race, but a very different race. And the main thing here is you had the announcers just totally perplexed as the race was unfolding, because they have in their heads, like, here are the kind of the boys who are the favorites to win the race, right? And right out of the gun, Hunter Jones, who happens to be from Michigan, by the way, Benzie Central, Hunter Jones goes out hard.
Yeah.
Just flying off the line.
2:14, 800?
Is that what it was? 2:14 or something? But through 400, it was like blazing fast. And then he started slowing already after 400.
Right.
So it was even faster than that. Yeah. So as he takes it out, people start kind of going with him, but they can't keep up. He's going so fast that he just runs away from everyone.
It's strung out so fast.
So quickly. And so right away, it's like, okay, this is like a 39-person race, and so it's not like it's going to be super crowded and such. And to string out a race of the best of the best in high school boys like that is just, either this guy knows what he's doing, or everyone's sitting there wondering, is that the right move here? Because these guys are fast behind you. They're gonna catch up, right? Well, it turns out that it didn't pay off for him in this instance, but it made it interesting because he still finished 10th overall.
Yeah, he still did great.
We should mention, right away, top 10 finish at Footlocker after a bold stroke like that early on. But what it came down to is it wasn't long after about 800 when Cole Mathisen catches, along with others, he was not by himself, but catches up, and Mathisen takes the lead and then never gives it back.
Never gave it up.
And that's not for others' want of trying.
Oh, they tried.
They tried a lot.
Yes.
But he simply wouldn't let anyone else lead the race. And this is, again, just a very interesting move. Now, to his advantage, one of his strengths appears to be downhill running.
Wow. Yes.
He goes really fast when the hills are down.
Huge separation going down the hills. Huge.
And he's got the technique to prove it, because he starts windmilling his arms a bit, and it just looks like he's just
crazy.
Like
he looks
propellers
out of
through the air.
control.
He actually did look a little bit out of control, but it worked for him.
But it worked, yeah. He must have had the muscle strength.
Yeah. This course is a 2-lap course, and so they hit this major downhill twice. And each time he just punished everyone. He came down the hill so fast. So they had to all catch back up to him afterwards the first time, and is like, okay, this will be interesting.
And the second time was him running away.
Yeah. And
for the win.
Yep. And at that time it was only a head-to-head duel even, and he still just ran away from him on the downhill with 800 meters left in the course. So Mathisen wins in an incredible effort, and amounts to, I think it was the first win for first win. He's from Minnesota, I believe. But anyway, so it was a very impressive run. He ran Nike Cross Nationals a week before and was 4th as well. So now looking at, he was 4th in Nike Cross, 1st in Footlocker. Clearly, this dude is top of the line.
Yep.
And so that was really cool. And then he announced afterwards, he's like, well, yeah, and since I'm also going to Colorado, also meaning, he and Carrie from the girls race are both going to Colorado. He's like, this is going to be a lot of fun. Colorado gets both of the Footlocker champions, which, what a recruiting year. Thankfully, they signed both of them before they won Footlocker,
right.
Or they might have to give them a little more. I mean, I'm sure they're already going for
exactly.
free. But so the point being, that's kind of exciting. Now we have let's watch Colorado Buffs in the next couple of years and see if these two flourish there as well.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of flourishing, Camile Heron adds yet another U.S. record to her resume. And now Camile Heron, she is our ultra running star here in the USA.
Just like a revenge record.
It
took away my other ones.
Yeah, it took away her world record, which she still has it, but I think you remember a couple weeks ago where, she had beaten her old record, but then the course was not then ratified.
Yeah, now I just don't, I don't understand. So this one's a track one, right?
This is on a track.
So 100-mile track.
On a track.
Like a 400-meter track. You're just running laps for 100 miles.
Yep.
I don't get that. I don't get the appeal of ever wanting to do that.
Well, she had a big smile on her face, as she always does.
Well, that's
so
because she's
finds
breaking all the records.
She's incredible. She ran 13 hours, 2 minutes, and 16 seconds.
For 100 miles?
Which is 7:49 pace for 100 miles. That includes bathroom breaks and eating and all of that.
Did she do any of that? I mean, maybe she just doesn't. Maybe she just never stops.
I don't know.
13 hours straight.
Can't stop, won't stop.
Line to line.
She improved her own time by about 19 minutes from the last time that she did the event. So she claimed that 100-mile track open record. And I will also remind you of her other U.S. record. She has the 12-hour, the 200K, the 24-hour, and then now the 100-mile. So quite the resume for Camile Heron, who is now also a Masters runner. So I don't know if they're also
Does that
they didn't
matter?
They didn't put it like as the Masters. It's like it is the Masters record, but
is it the Masters world record too?
It just said the U.S. record for this one, and it hasn't been. It's unofficial. It hasn't been.
Which we could be reporting here in a couple of weeks that they've taken it away.
I don't know how they could get the track wrong.
Yeah, measurements are a little bit easier on a track.
They're a little bit easier, yeah.
Although we have found over time, as we run on tracks all over the place, that not every track is actually accurately measured. It seems to be the case that every once in a while they don't really try that hard to.
That's crazy. I don't understand how they can get that.
They're probably
wrong.
old. It's probably old tracks that before precision mattered as much in the sport. Anyway, so
back to cross country.
That's impressive. But let's talk a little bit more about cross country. And now let's get to the adults here for a little bit. Cross country is like the never-ending season because you talk about like college and high school cross country, which starts in like August, and then you get into like adults run cross country sometimes, and that happens in the winter. And
that's not
spring is world championships cross country. So it's like
it's not
this
long in the winter for the.
I mean,
there's not very
like
many
3
opportunities
races,
for adults to run cross country. But we were going to get to these.
It's still exciting.
It is exciting. It's really exciting. So this is a team event. And
the Club Cross Country Championships.
Yes, there are 2 different cross country championships
in the U.S.
One is Club Cross Country Championships, and then the other is individual. But both have the opportunity to be scored individually, or like there are individual titles being given.
Yeah, and you have to think about it in 2 layers because so for Club Cross Country, you can't win money as an individual. They do have like money prizes for teams, but there's no individual prize money. And so the reason a person runs that race when they're not part of a club that's trying to compete for it is predominantly because they often get selected based off of the finish of that race for international cross-country races.
Which Zach has been selected. He represented Team USA.
My one time being able to run for Team USA.
Yep.
And so as it goes, it's incentivized for these runners who are going to potentially run more cross-country later on. They want to do this race. It's usually their first cross-country race of the season because some of the international contests like the North America, Central America, like the Pan Am, any of those types of things. There's a couple in Europe as well that are international. And so all of those tend to happen before the U.S. Cross Country Championships actually happen. So they can't select from that. Mm-hmm. In any event, it makes for a really interesting race.
It does, because we get a lot of really good athletes that will come and run this. And it's fun because a lot of them are track athletes. So to see them in a completely different environment is pretty thrilling.
Yeah,
I
well,
think.
it's like we didn't report on it, but because there were too many things to report on. But when On Athletics Club raced that cross country race last weekend,
that was cool.
2 weeks ago,
That was
whenever
really
that was.
cool. Yeah.
All these 1,500 meter track stars running cross country 10Ks. It's like, what are you doing out there?
So all of you from Michigan can be proud because the winners, the repeat champions.
They do a lot. They win this one a lot.
Of the cross country club national championships was Hanson's Brooks Distance Project.
No surprise.
That are out of Michigan. And the women's winner was Bethany Haas, and she's of Boston Athletics Association, and this is her first USATF title. And she can be very proud of herself because she edged out last year's winner and previous podcast guest, Natasha Rogers, who's an extremely strong runner of Hanson. She led them to their victory. And that was just a really strong run. And it was exciting. It was down to the last 100 meters. I mean, they were right neck and neck until the finish line, really. Yep. And then Andrea Rodenfels of Boston Athletics Association was third. And on the men's side, there's a name that you may be familiar with, but not when it comes to cross country necessarily.
Not ever. Actually, when it comes to cross country. I mean, he ran cross country in college, but he wasn't good.
I'm sure he was good. Zach. That's really funny.
All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was Cole Hawker, our 1,500 meter
miler star out of Oregon.
Yeah. And he won 5 seconds over Tom Anderson.
From Club Northwest, which now you get into. So Club Northwest is always a prominent force at the Club Cross Country Championships. They've got a lot of great runners at the kind of sub-pro level who run very strong in cross country. And so then you get names like Tom Anderson, who you're not going to see his name on the track and field.
Maybe not yet.
Or always. But in a cross country race like this, you'll see his name. So that's cool.
Zach Panning of Michigan and Hanson's Brooks Distance Project was third, and he led his team to victory. And the interesting thing about this event that I wanted to bring up, because I just love the little interesting tidbits, is that they changed the venue last minute to a horse track due to a fallen tree on the original course.
Was this in Kentucky?
No, it's always in the same place. It's always
not always in the same place. They move it around all the time.
Oh, well, it was in the same place as it was last year, I believe.
Where was anyway,
Sacramento.
The reason I ask it all is because where do you have a horse track nearby when you're running a cross country race? Of course, the answer there is they did. And so a tree falls on the course. My first question in that situation is, if a tree falls on the course and it's a cross country race, don't you just deal with it? Don't you just run over and around and through it? I mean, it's cross country after all. It's kind of the spirit of the sport. So in my mind right there, that for me is like an awesome opportunity to just have a crazy cross country race. And let's do it. Let's run over the tree. But in this instance,
it was in San Francisco, California. And it is different. You're right. It is different all the time.
Yes.
But the thing that I do want to mention about what you just said is that I've run it, and they had me jumping over hay bales.
Oh, yeah.
And it was so muddy. It was as normally like a rhythm runner, I like consistency. I prefer track, to be honest with you. Road races that have a lot of straight lines. So not my jam to be
not
diving down like mud hills that are curving at the bottom and then jumping over hay bales.
Yeah.
So, but they had, that would have been a great course for me, the horse track. So.
I mean, it certainly would help. Now that's like a paved track, right? Because now
it's not paved. No, it's dirt.
Okay, it's dirt horse track. Okay, good stuff. Well, as it goes, that made for some need for flexibility and agility for the athletes.
Well, maybe it was partially, but I did see some dirt. It could have been partially.
I'm not too worried about the exact surface. My point is simply that it was a change, and this is where you get some interesting things. I think this is a fascinating study in the sport, because when you're talking like the major national or international level competitions, they're highly rigid. They are not flexible by nature. And so even questions of, do we change the schedule because it's super hot? And they'll, do things like in the Olympic trials for the United States last year, or U.S. championships, not Olympic trials. they, competed in crazy hot conditions when they probably should have just said, let's wait 4 hours and do this later on when the sun's not baking our track. There's actually a lawsuit against USATF right now about that from one of the athletes. So as it were, they do something like that. But then you have like that 10K last year for the US Championships, where it was only the 10K event. It wasn't like a full-on meet. And they changed the day of the race last minute because of conditions. And so you get a situation like that where it's like a smaller thing. It's not one of the big events, and they're much more flexible. Club cross country is another one of those where a number of times they've changed course things last minute. One because it was like suddenly it was super muddy through this section, and it was like a foot deep of mud because it had rained or something. So they just reroute the course, and things like that they can do, and I kind of like that. It makes
Except then if there is someone who runs a record, they don't get that
Yeah,
ratified.
of course. But in situations like this, they almost never run records anyway. Now, these aren't the events where that kind of stuff happens. But
yeah. I did want to mention real quick, give a quick shout out to Katie Izzo.
Okay.
She's running for Adidas now, but she's contributed to our website before. So I wanted to give her a little shout out. She was 6th place.
Well done. 6th place finish. Good. Yeah, and I'm glancing at the men's results because we often see some names. So Isaac Updike is one I'll mention. He had like this resurgence the surge in steeplechase recently. And so he's just kind of one of those who's on the upswing, and it's cool to see his name in multiple different events because, keep watch over him, see what he can do this next year as well. Good stuff. All right, well, that kind of does it. There's certainly other things happening, and so we'll catch you up on all of the latest once again next time around. But for now, if you feel like you need something to plan for in the spring and you're going to be in the West Michigan area, Rivertown Races, not a bad idea. And if you sign up and then visit their training stuff, you'll find our name listed there because we're involved.
But wherever you are, we can help support you.
That's what I was about to say. And so let's say you're not running Rivertown Races, but you still would like some custom training support. That's a thing that we do a lot of lately, and we're glad to help you out if we can. And it only takes a couple of minutes on your part to get the process started. You go to the website, AtoZrunning.com/coaching. Look for the training plan builder and just fill out that form, and we'll get it started right away.
And it takes about
2 minutes.
No, for us to turn it around.
2 days.
2 days. Takes about 48 hours for us to turn it around to you with a plan.
That's it.
Well, thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.